So we're starting the hot water to blanch these plum tomatoes so that we can skin them and get them into these jars and start canning. Before we start canning, I just wanted to review some of the equipment, and the most important of which, of course, is the canning jar. These jars have been around for over 150 years. Actually, the first one was patented November 30th, 1858 by John Mason. That's why these are often called Mason jars. A guy named Lewis Boyd came up with a screw-top metal lid with a glass lining. It's changed over the course of his patent. But those two things really changed the way America preserved food. They no longer had to keep it in sawdust in the basement or in salt or dried or corn cobs. They could actually preserve fresh fruit and vegetable in these glass jars. The only competitor they had was a guy named Putnam, who came up with this lightning seal glass top that had a ridge in it that this metal wire band could quickly clamp down and quickly, lightning fast, seal the jar. And it wasn't until much later in 1882 that the Ball brothers got involved, and now, of course, they're synonymous. Their name is synonymous with canning jars. People don't even call them canning jars. They call them Ball jars. And they got into the glass business. They realized that Mason's patent had expired. They were formerly into making metal containers for paints and solvents. So they already had a metal manufacturing company, so they were able to replicate the Boyd lid, which they made out of zinc and porcelain, and that's still available today. The way all of these old jars work is they had a rubber gasket that would fit over the jar and onto this little shoulder. That was where the seal takes place. The zinc lid would then get placed on top, screwed tight, and I remember my grandmother, she would remove the jars from the boiling water, and while they were still hot, she could get another quarter turn out of them sometimes. When it was cool the following day, she would take a knife and run it around, pressing that zinc lip down onto the rubber washer. She'd then place these jars upside down on a newspaper or a paper bag, and if any of them leaked, they went into the fridge and they weren't put on the shelves for the winter. Today, I recommend getting new jars. They seal differently. They have a two-part lid and ring, and the rubber washer is embedded into the lid. These lids really seal on the rim of the jar. Even though these will fit the old jars, the rim is usually chipped. Sometimes it has a ridge from the manufacturing of the glass. So I recommend keeping these old jars for dried goods, herbs, spices, sugar, salt, flour, beans, anything. They're wonderful for gifts. They're beautiful to look at. So with all that said, why don't I just review a few other things, and then we'll start skinning these tomatoes for canning. We're going to need fresh squeezed lemon juice because the acidity of tomatoes has to be below 4.6. That's the cutoff for boiling water bath canning. Anything above 4.6 should really be pressure cooked. By putting vinegar or lemon juice, I prefer lemon juice because it tastes better, and these are organic lemons. That pretty much ensures that you'll be fine. We haven't had an issue. One reason people don't can is they're afraid they're going to kill their relatives. Some of us may want to kill our relatives, but canning is not a very good way to do it. Because canning is truly safe if everything is sterilized, done properly, and I'm gonna go through the process. We're gonna skin these plum tomatoes. We're gonna get them into these wide mouth jars. If you don't have wide mouth jars, you can still get them into the regular jars, but I use the regular jars for our tomato juice, which I make from the heirloom tomatoes. And the only other equipment you're gonna need is a good funnel to fill the jars. And all of this stuff should be non-reactive. It shouldn't be aluminum. It should be stainless steel. Plastic is okay. You're going to need a teaspoon of salt. If salt is an issue in your diet, you can eliminate it. It's not that important. You'll need a really good jar lifter because you're going to have to get these guys into and out of boiling water. So don't get a cheap one. Get a good one. I put the lids and rings together as a unit because I find it a little more easy to extract them with a pair of tongs. And I use a paper towel, or you could use a clean cotton rag to wipe the rim of the jar prior to putting the lid on. That removes any food or anything that might have spilled during the filling of the jar and assures a perfect seal, perfect vacuum seal. If they fail, they'll have that telltale click. If any of the jars make that sound after they've been through the boiling water bath and cooled, that means you do not have a seal. And those jars, like the ones that my grandmother found were leaking, should go into the fridge and should be eaten over the course of the next few weeks. They should not go on the shelf because they are not sealed and they're not canned. So that's a brief history on where these things came from. Again, I recommend using modern jars, and I've put 6 of them in the dishwasher, 7 of them actually, because this canning kettle holds 7 jars. The dishwasher heats them, sterilizes them at 212 degrees. So I'm going to take them out of the dishwasher. Once we've skinned these tomatoes, we'll get them into the jars, put them in a boiling water bath for 45 minutes, and we'll have our first batch of canned tomatoes. So why don't we get started?